name's Chris. I'm an alcoholic. Sober today by the grace of God in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, and neither one I really kind of want anything to do with on certain given days. Um, so this is weird that I'm kind of sharing on a internet forum. I'm not really used to that all that much. So anyway, I guess I'll tell you what it was like, what happened, and what it's like now. My sobriety date is November 15th of 2014. Um, I My first introduction to Alcoholics Anonymous was at the age of 25. I am now 30. So if you want to do the math, that's 5 years. But my sobriety date is 14th, and like I guess the first time around and coming in Alcoholics Anonymous, I really couldn't relate with. I really couldn't relate, or I chose not to relate. More importantly, with people that were sharing their experience. With everything. Um, so like my what happened was that I got introduced to alcohol at pretty much a fairly young age. I was 20. I was 8 years old. And I pretty much just got introduced to alcohol by my parents. They drank on the weekends. They were, so to speak, weekend warriors, and they drank socially, and that's what I thought alcohol was. Social lubricant, and in the early years of my drinking, that's exactly what it was. It was a social lubricant. Um, I wasn't really one to fit in with anybody. I was that big-eared glasses uh, kid that had ADHD that had to go to the nurse every day at 1 o'clock to get medication for that ADHD. So right from the get, like I felt that I was different from everyone else. So like what happened was when I first took that first drink at 8 years old, I felt something inside me that was like, this is something that's going to make an exhilarating change in my life. Um, and I never had another drink. I didn't have another drink until I was 14. And my first time having that drink, I that first time having that drink, I pretty much I blacked out. I came to in the hospital having to get my stomach pumped at 14 years old, and that was my first drunk. Um, I was told early on, never forget your first drunk, or always remember your first drunk and never forget your last. And so I hold on to my first drunk as a testament that you know um, I'm most certainly an alcoholic. Um, I took that first drink, and it was I didn't stop until I had enough. And being the alcoholic that I am, there really isn't ever enough. I drank as long as the supply was there, and if it wasn't, then I did anything that I could to find that supply. Um, I won't sit here and give you a bunch of my war stories, but what I will tell you, what I will say is that every time I drank, I couldn't stop, and every time I wasn't drinking, I was probably one of the most miserable, antisocial, aggressive, angry person to be around. Um, so, like, if I really look back in my drinking history, there were tons of red flags. Multiple times getting arrested, multiple times, going into courts and having to, um, just barely get out of it by the skin of my teeth. Um, and so long story short, I my last night, my last well, not my last time, um, I had this girlfriend that she was ready to go and she was leaving, and the selfish man that I was, and I got her pregnant, and I had in the birth of my son happen, and so like I now have this kid coming on the way, and like I'm trying to figure out the best combination to control and enjoy my drinking, and I never could find that balance. Um, and so like when my son was finally born, um, I didn't really take anything of it. I was so irresponsible, with in regards to my son. Um, there were times where I it was my time to watch him or my duty to take night watch, and instead of being the responsible adult and not having friends over, I'd have friends over, and we'd be drinking out on the porch, and my son sleeping in the bedroom, um, pretty much choking. And one night, she came out and she started screaming at me, and I had no idea why. And she's like, Chris, like, our son was choking in the bedroom, and thank God that I was in the room with him, or else he wouldn't be alive. Um, alcohol took the most important position in my life, and I'm not proud of that. Um, So like right there, it was kind of like I started to see like the signs of my alcoholism, and my mother always tipped me up, and she's like, Chris, you remind me of my uncle, um, and my uncle hung himself to this disease. He went to the alcohol, he went to the rooms for a little while, and he just couldn't get a grasp of it, and he always drank. He was always still drinking, and one day the demons caught up with him, and he took his own life. Um, and that's who I reminded her of, and that was her brother. And so like around all this time, like like I was not available to be a father. I was not available to be a son. Um, and so like one night, I got into some trouble, and like the next morning, I woke up and I had no recollection of anything that I did the night before, and I looked in my back pocket, and I had a couple pink slips from two different police stations, and um, I was just like, I've got to get a hold of this. I got to figure out how I can get a hold of this. So I voluntarily put myself in a treatment center, and I went to that treatment center with the intent that I was going to figure out how to drink like a normal person again. Um, like I had no idea that I was in this grips of this disease, and so like long story short, like I went to this rehab. I heard a man come in from Alcoholics Anonymous, tell me his story, tell me my story, um, and I heard what Alcoholics Anonymous did for him, but I only heard the monetary things, the material things that he got back. He got his son back, he got a car, he got a house, he got a girlfriend, he got all of these great things, and I thought that that's what Alcoholics Anonymous was going to give me, and so like I went back to my counselor. I stayed for another 28 days, and 28 days later, they hand you a slip and say, here's a list of meetings in your area. Go there and put your hand up and tell them you're new, and ask for help. And so I did that, and I went to the meetings, and I put my hand up and did what they told me to do. And they said, get a home group, get a commitment, get a sponsor. And I had no idea what any of those were. Um, so I got a sponsor first because that seemed like it was the most important thing, I guess. And my sponsor said, "Okay, great. Now we're going to go through these steps." And he pointed to the steps on the wall, and I was like, "Okay, that's sounds good." And you know, um, so I did that. I did what I was told. I did the steps, um, but I did the steps as a checklist. Like, cool. I'm powerless over alcohol. Yeah, I get that. I'm okay with that. Yeah, all right, all right. Um, we're gonna make an inventory here, and I did that, and I wrote down everything that I was capable at the time of doing. Um, and then like I started going out and making these amends, and things were going well for a while, and eventually I stopped going to meetings. I relocated from where I lived, and the first thing that went out the window was my meetings. I stopped going to meetings. I stopped helping people. I stopped calling my sponsor. I stopped working a program. And one thing led to another. I put myself in a relationship that I had no reason being, no right to be in, because well, I wouldn't say that. I put myself in a relationship, or I'm seeking a relationship with a woman who didn't want one, and I wanted it so bad because I thought that I was ready, and she chose not to go in that relationship, and I used that for an excuse to drink. And I drank, and she was in the program, and like I started drinking with her in the other room, and she was like, Chris, what the fuck are you doing? Why are you drinking? And I said, well, I'm still an asshole, so I might as well drink. And her response, and I'll never forget it. She goes, it was probably one of the best responses that could happen at the time. She said, Chris, you didn't join. You're in AA. It's not Assholes Anonymous. It's Alcoholics Anonymous. You have a problem with drinking, you know. Um, that couldn't be any more true. Like, I thought that, like, just because I stopped drinking, you know, like, I thought I was okay, but I was still on the inside. I was still, very selfish, very deceitful, very, dishonest with a lot of things. Um, so, like, fast forward a bit, I came back to the rooms, and again, I did a sponsor. Well, I got a sponsor, but I got a home group that just told me not to drink, and go to meetings and help somebody. But this time around, like, I knew I couldn't just not drink. There was more to it. So I sat around this meeting for 11 months, and I almost went crazy, and I thought of suicide every single day. There's a part in our book that's probably one of my favorite parts, and it's on page 152. It talks about that boy whistling in the dark. Inwardly would give anything to take a half a dozen drinks and get away with it. For he isn't happy about his sobriety, and that was me. And like, any given time, like even now today, and I can still feel like that person, and I do feel like that person today. um I'm at the jumping off place. I was at that jumping off place, and a man came in to my life, and he said, Chris, I'm going to take you through the book of Alcoholics Anonymous, the way it was written, and I want to show you that implication, the implementation of these steps in your life. And I was like, okay. So he got the business, and I had this fire lit up me for recovery. And I did the steps again, and like, this time I felt different. I felt something differently, and I held on to that. I held on to that feeling for a very long time, and the key word is I held on to it for a very long time. Um, Another part in our book, it says, that we, be careful not to rest on our laurels. And like, the past few months have not been easy for me. I started a new job where I work, pretty much 12 hours a day, and I don't make as many meetings as I used to. And being the habit, being the creatures of habit, the creatures of repeat of, here's the creatures of habit. I'm starting to see myself repeat the same story of my last relapse, and that terrifies the shit out of me. So, like, I I have a new sponsor now, and I'm willing to go through the work again, and really find another, have another experience with this book. Unfortunately, the job that I have is one that, obviously I need a job. There's no excuse for me to not make meetings. Sometimes I'm tired, and that's my excuse. I'm tired. And like, I know the answers. I know exactly. Well, I don't know anything, but like, I can just hear the responses from alcoholics outside, that say, "Oh, Chris, you were tired and you're drinking, but you still drink." Yeah, so not going to a meeting is not an excuse anymore. Um, so, like, almost 3 years sober, like, I'm still, like, I see a lot of my character defects rearing their ugly heads, and I'm terrified of that. I may not have been the best speaker to talk tonight, but you know what? Like, I mean, maybe my experience can help somebody that is here, that's, maybe on their way maybe on their way out of Alcoholics Anonymous, just like I was, or just like I may be, if something doesn't change, if I don't change. So like, I would like to sit here and tell you that everything's great and everything's peachy and like, um, everything's wonderful. There's rainbows every single day, and that's not the reality. Um, like the reality is for me, my experience, like I've been getting restless, I've been getting miserable, I've been getting irritated, I've become dishonest, I've become a monster that I always fought to not become. And it's just as much as I'm powerless over alcohol, I'm powerless over a lot of things. I'm powerless over my defects, and if I don't have this conscious contact, if I don't have this relationship with God, then these character defects, my ego will come back out and play and say, hey, you don't need those meetings. You don't need those steps. You don't need those people in those rooms. You know, keep making money, keep showing up, keep making everything on the outside look great, and you're gonna be all right. And my experience tells me that that's not true. But the weak person that I could be on any given day could easily believe that. Um, I don't know exactly how long I've shared. I think I might be at my mark. But if there's anything you can kind of take away from this, that you know, um, we can easily lose sight of all of this just by chasing this egotistical view of where we think we should be. And the first things that go out the window is meeting attendance. And then you're not you're availing yourself to a sponsor. you know I've been until recently I got my sponsor at Icky this weekend. And before that I was sponsored. I didn't have a sponsor for almost a month. And that was real scary because I was making a lot of decisions based on my own thinking. And so I guess I'll end with this. If you're in here, there's obviously a reason you're here. There's obviously a reason I'm here. And like I just gotta, I have to begin this new relationship with God again. And the one thing that I know I've had experience with that gets me that relationship is through the steps. An honest appraisal of my actions, an honest appraisal of where I'm wrong. And when I'm wrong, I have to admit that. Um, and I have to acknowledge that, and I have to look for the solution to change that. And all of that's through the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. Um, so, if you're new, if you're here and you're struggling, there's no excuse. At least for me, and I got to hear first for myself. There's no excuse to not make a meeting. There are people out there that really care for you and love you, and will do anything to get well. But you also have to be willing to go to any length to get well as well. So it's an honor and privilege to speak anywhere through Alcoholics Anonymous. And I'd like to thank the Fifth Dimensional Group for asking our bid to speak and giving me the opportunity to be of service. That's all I got. Thanks.